April 25, 2007, Heilbronn, Germany. A young police officer, 22-year-old Michelle Kieswetter, was found slumped over in her patrol car. Shot in the head. Blood soaking her uniform. Her partner next to her, barely alive. No sign of struggle. No warning. No escape. But then, DNA was found. On the car door. The same DNA had been found at 40 other crime scenes across Europe. Murders. Burglaries. Drug raids. Same woman. But no one had seen her. She had no name. No face. They called her the Phantom of Heilbronn. What they uncovered next would destroy public trust and shake the foundations of forensic science. This is a true story. Subscribe to Unbelievable True Story and stay until the end. Heilbronn, Germany, April 25, 2007. 2 p.m. It was a sunny spring afternoon in southern Germany. The kind of day where people sat outside cafes. Kids rode bicycles past flower shops. A small city, peaceful and clean. Nothing felt out of place. But inside a parked police car, everything was wrong. Officer Michelle Kieswetter, just 22 years old, was slumped in the driver's seat. She wasn't moving. Her uniform was soaked in blood. Next to her, her partner Martin Arnold, was still alive, barely. He was bleeding from the head. In shock. His eyes open but lost. He couldn't speak. Couldn't say what happened. No one had heard a gunshot. No one had seen anything. 2 officers. Gunned down. In the middle of the day. In the middle of the city. The first officer to arrive on the scene screamed into the radio. Officer down. I repeat, officer down. Possible fatal. A silence fell over the area. Even birds seemed to stop singing. Michelle was not a threat to anyone. She was young. Friendly. Loved her job. Her family said she was the kind of person who smiled even on rainy days. She had joined the police just a year before. A girl from Thuringen with big dreams, she wanted to work in criminal investigations one day. Maybe even in homicide. Now, she was the victim of one. And no one knew why. Police locked down the area. Streets were sealed. Forensics arrived quickly. The car was dusted. Photographed. Swabbed. And that's when they found it. DNA. On the driver's door. Clear. Clean. Female. But it didn't belong to Michelle. It didn't match any known criminal in Germany. And yet, detectives felt something strange. One officer leaned in and said, "That profile, it looks familiar." They checked their system again. It was familiar. Over the next few days, that same female DNA was matched to multiple old cases. A murder in Freiburg. A robbery in Mainz. A shootout in Austria. Even an unsolved case in France. The same woman's DNA had been found at over 30 crime scenes. Different years. Different cities. Different crimes. Sometimes she was linked to petty theft, other times, to murder. She was everywhere. And yet, no one had ever seen her. They called her the Phantom. The German press was the first to give her a name. The Phantom of Heilbronn. But she had been around long before Michelle's murder. In 2001, the same DNA had been found at the scene of a bullets and cash robbery. In 2003, it showed up after the murder of an elderly woman in Freiburg. In 2006, it appeared again, this time, at a shooting near Vienna, Austria. Always the same profile. Always no other evidence. The woman had no face. No name. No trail. Just a whisper of blood. A silent ghost. When the media reported the DNA connections, fear spread across Europe. Was it one woman? A criminal genius? A serial killer? Or was it a network? A group using the same tools? Citizens began to worry. If police couldn't catch her, who could? She's everywhere, one headline read. She could be your neighbor. Women who lived alone began locking their windows during the day. Parents told their kids to stay in after school. The country had faced killers before. But never a ghost. Behind closed doors, German investigators were falling apart. How could the same DNA appear in 3 different countries, tied to so many crimes, and yet there was no lead? No face. No surveillance. They cross-referenced every police report. Interviewed hundreds of witnesses. Nothing. The phantom was like vapor. Always gone before they arrived. Worse, she was now linked to the murder of one of their own. And that made it personal. She killed a cop, one commander said in a press briefing. We will not rest until she is caught. They formed a task force. Poured millions into new testing. They brought in experts from France, Austria, and Switzerland. But the more they looked, the more confusing it got. They went back to Michelle's patrol car. They re-examined everything. The position of the bodies. The wounds. The angle of the shots. The time between patrol check-ins. What they found was haunting. The shooter had likely approached from the passenger side. No sign of forced entry. Both officers were caught off guard. No shouting. No struggle. Just 2 quick shots. Like the killer knew exactly what they were doing. But why kill a police officer? Why in broad daylight? And why leave no trace, except DNA? Was it really her? Some detectives started asking the unthinkable. Are we even sure she did it? No witness had seen a woman. No one had heard a female voice. Just the DNA. But how could that be wrong? DNA never lies. Right? As the sun set over Heilbronn that night, the city felt darker than ever. In homes, people whispered about the phantom woman. In police stations, officers sat in silence, staring at case files with no answers. And in the hospital, Martin Arnold, Michelle's partner, was still in a coma. He might have seen the shooter. But for now, the only clue was a trace of blood. And a question echoing in everyone's mind. Who is the woman without a face? By the end of 2007, the name, the Phantom, was being whispered across Europe. In crime units. On the news. At dinner tables. She wasn't just a suspect anymore. She was a mystery that made trained detectives afraid to close their eyes at night. And the deeper they looked into her trail, the stranger it became. Investigators thought the DNA would help them narrow things down. Find a location. A pattern. Something. Instead, it exploded. They found the same female DNA in a garden shed in Gerolstein after a robbery. A drug house in Saarbrücken. A plastic bag used in an assault. A toy pistol at a crime scene. A cookie crumb from a house break-in. Each one tested. Each one matched. One woman. 40 crime scenes. It wasn't just in Germany. In Austria, they found her DNA on a shell casing after a police shootout. In France, they traced it to a burned-out car near a smuggling ring. Wherever violence happened, her ghost showed up. Different years. Different crimes. No fingerprints. No sightings. No confessions. Only DNA. It made no sense. Some detectives believed she was a master criminal. Others believed she was a shadow figure behind Europe's growing crime rings. But there was one problem. No one could prove she even existed. Investigators tried everything. They put the DNA into international databases. They used facial reconstruction based on genetic markers. They built age predictions, skin tone simulations, even a 3D hologram. But there was no name. No face. No family. She has no country, one officer said. No history. No record. It's like she was born in the shadows. Then a new theory began to spread. Was it a group? Some believed the Phantom was not one woman, but many. A crime syndicate. A team of women trained to avoid detection. Others said it was a man using stolen DNA. Or that her DNA was being planted to confuse police. But that didn't explain how the same profile kept showing up, exactly the same, over and over again. Either she's the most dangerous woman in Europe. Or we're all being fooled. The German government was watching. The Phantom case had now cost millions. Police officers were exhausted. Families of victims were angry, especially Michelle Kieswetter's. Her parents begged the media for help. Someone out there knows what happened, her mother said in tears. Please, just come forward. But no one did. And in police stations across the continent, one question kept being whispered. How do you catch a woman, who might not be real? 2008. A body was found in the woods near a German village. A man, shot execution style. The ground was muddy. His pockets were turned inside out. Robbery. Murder. Cold-blooded. Police swabbed everything. And there it was again. Her DNA. A detective on the scene looked over the files. Then leaned back and said softly. She was just in Austria last week. Now she's in Germany again. 2 hours apart. They double-checked. Confirmed. Same DNA profile. Less than 48 hours apart. It didn't make sense. She would have had to travel hundreds of miles overnight, commit 2 different crimes, and leave no other trace. No tickets. No car. No cash. Just DNA. And that's when some detectives stopped believing. In newsrooms, the story became legend. Some said she was a ghost. Some said she was an assassin. Some believed she was part of a deep state government operation. Others said she wasn't real at all. But one thing was certain. She had stolen the spotlight. Police were obsessed. Whole departments focused on nothing but her. Other cases, real victims, were pushed aside. The Phantom, said one journalist, was now more famous than any of her victims. By late 2008, she had a dozen nicknames. The Shadow Killer. The DNA Witch. The Invisible Woman. The Woman Without a Face. People imagined her differently in every country. Blonde. Dark-haired. Wearing a scarf. Wearing a smile. No one knew. Because no one had ever seen her. Meanwhile, the case of Michelle Kieswetter remained unsolved. Detectives continued to ask. Was she targeted? Was it random? Was the Phantom even there? Her DNA was the only link. But everything else was a dead end. No motive. No suspects. And the only living witness, Martin Arnold, still couldn't remember the shooting. Doctors said his memory might never come back. And the trail was going cold. Something strange happened. In 2009, at a crime lab in Germany, a technician opened a sealed box. Inside, a bullet casing. Evidence from a long-closed case. It had been stored safely in police evidence for 2 years. It had never left the building. The technician swabbed it just to check. And there it was. Her DNA. Everyone froze. How did she get into a sealed box? Suddenly, the entire case began to collapse. Detectives were now faced with a terrifying idea. What if the DNA itself was the mistake? What if none of it was real? The investigation had spent 6 years, millions of euros, and chased one ghost. And now, that ghost might have come from a box in a lab. 2009. Germany. A lab technician stared at her screen. She was supposed to be checking an old bullet casing from an unrelated case, a formality. It had been stored in a sealed evidence locker for 2 years. It had never left the building. It had never been touched by a suspect. But somehow, it contained her DNA. The same female profile that haunted 40 other crime scenes. And in that moment, everything broke apart. The technician called her supervisor. Then the forensics director. Then the lead investigator on the Phantom case. By midnight, the entire cold case unit was awake. "This is not possible," one whispered. Unless. Someone in the room said the words no one wanted to hear. What if the DNA didn't come from the crime scenes? What if it came from us? They went back to the evidence room. They pulled everything used during those years. Cotton swabs. Plastic tubes. DNA kits. Cleaning cloths. They tested all of it. Carefully. Silently. And then, the truth came out. The cotton swabs, the ones used to collect DNA from every single scene, were contaminated. The woman's DNA did exist. She was real. But she had never killed anyone. She never held a gun. She never robbed a house. She never even touched the evidence. She worked in the factory that made the swabs. They traced the DNA back to a small town in Bavaria. A woman. Name undisclosed. She worked in packaging sterile cotton swabs for a medical supply company. She had no criminal record. She had never been arrested. She wasn't in any database. But somehow, tiny particles of her DNA had ended up on the cotton swabs. The same ones used by police labs across Europe. The DNA wasn't planted by a killer. It had been accidentally placed on crime scenes by the very people trying to solve them. The Phantom of Heilbronn was not a serial killer. She was not a gang leader. She was not an assassin. She was not real. She was a factory worker who unknowingly haunted some of Europe's most disturbing crimes, just by going to work. And every time investigators tested a crime scene, they found her, instead of the real suspect. The task force that hunted the Phantom had over 40 officers. They had spent 16 million euros on DNA tests, travel, and manpower. Dozens of real cases went cold because detectives were chasing a ghost. Entire towns had lived in fear. Women had locked their doors. Parents had kept their children inside. All because of a cotton swab. Back in Heilbronn, Michelle Kieswetter's family was crushed. They had waited years for justice. But now, with the Phantom proven false, they were back at square one. "We thought they had a lead," her father said quietly. "Now, they have nothing." The real person who killed Michelle and wounded her partner Martin Arnold was still out there. In March 2009, the German police held a press conference. For the first time, they said the words out loud. "We believe the DNA match to the so-called Phantom of Heilbronn may be the result of contamination of evidence." The public was stunned. So were journalists. Some laughed. Some cried. Most just asked one question. How did no one catch this earlier? The fallout was huge. Germany changed its entire system for DNA collection. From that day on, all forensic swabs had to be DNA-free certified. Police labs retrained their entire staff. Old cases were reopened and re-examined. Other countries followed. Austria. France. Switzerland. The Phantom had left her mark, not in blood, but in policy. The woman whose DNA had been used, the factory worker, was never charged. She had done nothing wrong. She had no idea what was happening. She had unknowingly become the most wanted woman in Europe. For 6 years, she was a ghost haunting crime scenes she never visited. And when the truth came out, she simply went back to work. In April 2009, the German police officially closed the Phantom case. The profile that had connected murders, robberies, and disappearances across 3 countries was declared a lab error. There never was a phantom, one investigator said bitterly. Only our own shadow. But one thing was not solved. Michelle Kieswetter's murder. Someone shot her. Someone tried to kill Martin Arnold. And it was not the Phantom. So the question remained. If the Phantom wasn't real, then who really killed Officer Kieswetter? 2009, Heilbronn, Germany. The Phantom was gone. The DNA trail, exposed as a lab error. The ghost woman, just a factory worker. But the murder of Michelle Kieswetter was still very real. A 22-year-old police officer, gunned down in daylight on a quiet street. Shot in the head. Her partner left bleeding beside her. It wasn't a phantom. It was a person. A killer with a gun. A reason. A face. And the scariest part? He had never been caught. Detectives now had to go back to square one. Forget the DNA. Start fresh. April 25, 2007. Heilbronn. 2 young officers, Michelle Kieswetter and Martin Arnold, were eating lunch in their police car. It was a warm spring day. People walked by. Children laughed nearby. Then, 2 strangers walked up to their patrol car. No warning. No conversation. Just gunfire. Bang. Bang. In just a few seconds, Michelle was dead. Martin was unconscious. Whoever attacked them didn't steal their wallets. Didn't take their weapons. Didn't leave fingerprints. They simply disappeared. Why? What kind of person attacks 2 police officers, in broad daylight, in the middle of a city? It wasn't random. It wasn't a robbery. This was planned. Buried deep in the files was a tiny note. From 2006. A year before the murder. A police report from another German city, Kassel. A robbery. A man with ties to neo-Nazi groups had been arrested. Inside his home, they found weapons, stolen IDs, and police uniforms. The man was part of a violent underground cell. At the time, no one connected it to Michelle's murder. But after the Phantom was ruled out, they looked again. And what they found was terrifying. It was called the National Socialist Underground, or NSU. A secret neo-Nazi terrorist group. Formed in the 1990s by 3 members. Uwe Bonhart. Uwe Mundlos. And Beats Shape. They lived in hiding. Used fake names. Robbed banks. Made bombs. And, they killed. Between 2000 and 2007, 9 men were murdered in Germany. All immigrants. All small business owners. All killed at close range. The press called them the donor murders because most ran food stands. Police thought it was gang-related. They never once suspected far-right extremists. But then came 2007. And Michelle was killed. She didn't fit the pattern. She wasn't an immigrant. She was a police officer. So what changed? Some now believe the NSU wanted to send a message. They feared Michelle and Martin were getting too close. Or maybe they were simply targets, to test the group's reach. To show they could kill police and get away with it. It was no longer about race. It was about power. And for 4 more years, the killers walked free. November 4, 2011. Eisenach, Germany. A routine police call. A camper van was on fire. Inside were the bodies of Uwe Mundlos and Uwe Bonhart. Gunshot wounds to the head. A pistol in Mundlo's hand. A murder-suicide. Police recovered a laptop. A hard drive. And a burned video. What they found stunned the country. In the video, cartoons flashed across the screen. Goofy music played. Then came the pictures. Crime scene photos. Victims' faces. The NSU logo. It was a trophy reel. A twisted confession, mocking the victims. At the end, the video read, "This was our work." And then, a single image of Michelle Kieswetter. She was their victim. It was now confirmed. The NSU had killed her. Not the Phantom. Not a ghost. Two real men, driven by hate, hiding in plain sight for over a decade. They had murdered Michelle. And police had been looking in the wrong direction all along. The third NSU member, Beats Shape, turned herself in days later. She walked into a police station and said, "I'm the one you're looking for." She was charged with 10 murders, 2 bombings, and 15 robberies. But even then, something didn't add up. 3 people couldn't do all this alone. So who helped them? Over the next few years, investigators found dozens of sympathizers. Supporters who gave money, fake IDs, and shelter. Spies who had been watching the group for years, and said nothing. One witness even claimed that German intelligence knew about the NSU. But let them operate. On purpose. To track bigger threats. If that's true, it means the government let Michelle die. And said nothing. Germany was shaken. How could a policewoman be murdered by neo-Nazis? While the nation was hunting a fake woman made of lab dust. Protests erupted. People lit candles in Michelle's name. Her face appeared on posters that read, "Never forget the real victims." In 2013, Beats Shape went on trial. She sat quietly. Expressionless. Survivors testified. Families cried. Detectives explained how they were misled for years by a fake DNA profile. The trial lasted 5 years. In 2018, Beat was found guilty of 10 murders. She was sentenced to life in prison. But for many, it didn't feel like justice. In court, Michelle's mother stood up. Her voice shaking. "We believed for years the Phantom was real. Now we know the truth. But the pain, it's the same. My daughter is still gone. And she still has no grave with justice. The Phantom of Heilbronn was never real. But the pain she left behind was. She was a lie, born in a lab. And that lie let 2 real killers escape. Imagine this. 2 neo-Nazis kill a police officer. Film it. Keep it like a trophy. Then live free, for 4 more years. No arrests. No trial. No justice. Now ask yourself. What if they hadn't died in that van? What if Beats Shape never turned herself in? What if the Phantom had kept fooling everyone forever? If you're drawn to real stories that stay with you, subscribe now to Unbelievable True Story. Because every week, we reveal the darkest truths hidden in plain sight. Watch the next video on your screen, or explore our full playlist of true crimes and cold cases. The next one might be even more disturbing.